Hey guys, John here, and welcome back to the Synthmaster tutorial course. In today's video, we're going to be discussing the tabs located at the top bar of the synth, and kind of learning where everything is located and taking a look at the modular architecture of Synthmaster 3. And when we first load up Synthmaster, by default, we're selected on this tab view up here on the left-hand side. Now, before we start taking a look at all these different tabs, one thing you should know is how to resize the synthesizer, because that's one of the first things I kind of generally like doing as well. And to do that in Synthmaster, down here on the bottom right-hand corner, we can just click and drag to a size that fits our liking. So on the very top left of Synthmaster, we can click on this gear icon, and this is going to bring up a menu such as the version, your registered email address, check for updates and changing the skin, and quite a few other things as well. So that's good to know that this menu is here. So let's dive right in and let's load up an init preset just in case. And here in the tab view is where we're going to be spending probably most of our time. And that's because inside here we have our layers, we have our oscillators, we have our filters, we have modulators, effects, and quite a lot more. So the first thing we should probably take a look at is what exactly is a layer. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the course, each preset can have a max of 16 different layers, and within each layer, you can have up to 16 different modules. Now, we can rename a layer by going up here at the top where it says layer 1. We can double click this here, and we can call this bass, for example. So maybe we want this layer just to be focused on a bass while we have other layers focused on different things. Now, this would be probably a good way to start labeling things. So each layer we can solo with the S button over here, or we can mute the layer with the M button. And on the right hand side of the layer, we have another gear icon. And here we can do stuff like editing, we can do some copying, we can do some saving, and so on and so forth. And then there's another gear to the right hand side. And here we can duplicate this layer. So let's say we want to duplicate this bass to make a slightly different version of the bass with all the different settings that we have. That would be a nice way to do that. Or we can start adding a new layer and then we can keep going, so on and so forth. And we get to a point where once this starts going a little bit off screen like that, we're going to see a magnifying glass and then some arrows. So once you have a lot of layers going on, like maybe if you're actually using all 16, it might be nice to click this magnifying glass and then go to a different layer if you want to. So you can start taking a look at that one. Or you can use the carrots here or the arrows and kind of navigate that way via pages. Now, if we want to remove a layer, we can go to the gear icon and then we can go to remove, and then we can select whichever one we'd like to remove. And keep in mind, let's say, for example, that we remove the bass and we say, oh, whoops, we removed the bass. We can go to the undo here at the top and we can get our bass back. So something to know. So from a default preset here, let's briefly go over what is inside of a layer and where we can find everything. So first things first is going to be the oscillator, and that's located here on the top left, this window up here. And here we have settings that you would expect: volume, panning, pitch, detune, kind of things like that. Now, it's similar to how the layers function. So let's say, for example, we want to add another oscillator here. We would select the gear icon and then we would go to add new, and we would pick the type of oscillator that we want, or we can go to duplicate and we can duplicate this oscillator and make some variations or some changes based on the settings that we just did. So something good to know about. So to the right of the oscillator section, we have our filter section. Now right here we have one filter, which is labeled filter 1, and here's where we can add more filters if we'd like to. So we can select the gear icon, very similar to how the oscillators and the layers work. We select the gear icon, we can again duplicate, or we can add a new one, and we pick our different type. Now inside the filter, we have again the familiar controls we would think, like our frequency cutoff, resonance, key tracking, so on and so forth. And again, we're going to dive deep into every different section a little bit later on. And then on the right hand side here, we have another gear. So here, if we want to swap this filter with something else, we can replace it, we can lock it, we can reset the values, we can copy it, we can save it, and so on and so forth. So directly below the oscillator section, we have our modulator section, and here's where we have our envelopes, LFOs, things like that. And again, it's a very similar workflow with this gear. So let's say we want to add another envelope. We select the gear, we go to add new, and we can select new ADSR envelope or multi-stage. We have LFO, noise LFO, so on and so forth. And then over here on this gear icon, we have some more settings. Again, we have like copying, editing, resetting values plus modulations and locking and saving. So definitely good to know where those things are. And now to the right of the modulator section and below the filter section, we have quite a few different things. So the first one is going to be this layer. So here we can deal with the keyboard zones of our patches or the velocity zones, which we're going to get into detail a little bit later on. And then we have our routing tab, which is going to deal with signal flow, which is really cool to get into and just kind of routing things in different ways. And a lot of experimentation goes on here. And then we have our effects tab, which we can add layer effects to our patches. So kind of traditional effects that you would expect. And then we have our sequencer, and then we have our ARP. So now let's take a look at the track view. So up here at the top, we'll select track view and we have layer one. So for example, if we went back to our tab view under layer one, let's double click and let's call this one bass. Let's add a new layer and let's call this guy maybe guitar. And then let's add one more and let's call this one keys. So now we have three layers, one that deals with bass, one that deals with guitar, and then one that deals with keys. Now, if we go back to our track view, now we can see we have bass, guitar, and we have keys. And if we play something, we can see that all these things are happening at the same time. So here, for example, we can let's say let's mute our guitars and mute our keys. Now we just hear our bass. We can adjust the volume of this layer and kind of mix it in a certain way here. We have access to the sequencer, the ARP, and so for example, if we wanted our bass sequence on, we click this on, we go back to our tab view, we go to our bass, and then we see here in the sequence that this is now enabled. We can now, let's say, let's disable this, go back to our track view, and we can see that it's disabled here. So it's almost a different way of looking at what's going on with our patch. Now here we can see what's happening within the sequencer, we can see what's happening within the ARP, we can see what's going on with the voices, and we can see what's happening with our zones, and we can see that those are kind of different stuff over here. So long story short, once this course progresses, these different windows are going to start making a lot more sense, as well as this view is going to be a nice way to just work with everything at once. So next up, we have the mix view, and this should be quite a comfortable window to look at because this is set up as most faders are set up, right? We have our different faders here, which is going to be our different layers, right? We have our bass, guitar, and our keys. And down here at the bottom, we have muting, we have soloing, we have our fader for volume. And up here at the top, we have our inserts. So maybe on the bass, we have an EQ and a compressor. Maybe on the guitar, we have EQ and compressor as well. Maybe some reverb or chorus or delays, things like that. And maybe same thing for our keys. So here we can see the different inserts we have on the different layers, kind of like a console view. And then down here, we have the sends going to FX plus 1, 2 to the output. So it's a really nice way to kind of just look at our patch and start kind of mixing everything together if that's the workflow that we like. So next up, we have our undo and redo buttons located directly to the right of this mix view, which is pretty self-explanatory. You make a mistake and you want to undo it, then you want to hit the undo button. Or if you want to go back again, you can hit the redo button. And to the right of that, we have our center display. So here it's going to show what preset we're on. Currently, we're on the init preset. We have the arrows to cycle between the different presets. And it's nice here, we also have voices. So depending on how many voices we have on our patch or how many that we're playing, we can see at the top here how many that we're using and also our CPU usage. And if you like this preset, then we have a quick star here, which is going to favorite that preset. And after that, we have our random button, which is going to select a random preset that we have. And then below that, we have save, which we've already talked about. We've talked about the browser and we've also talked about the info, but we haven't yet talked about the shop. So inside here is where we go shopping for some new presets, and here on the right-hand side, we can select the different ones. So for example, Synthmaster Producer Bundle, Synthmaster Everything Bundle, just kind of scroll through these different ones here. On the left-hand side, it's going to show you how many presets it has. So this Synthmaster Everything Bundle has 7,300 presets, the date it was released, how much it's going to cost, and also the description. So maybe you want to read a little bit more about this bundle before you get it. And if you want to listen to it to see what it sounds like before you get it, down here at the center, we have some audio demos. So if you click one of these, it's going to open up a browser and you can take a listen to see what it sounds like before you get it. So the last few options we have left are going to be the master output fader, and that's located here at the top. Now here's where we adjust the final output of our patch, and this can be useful if we need to make adjustments to everything, which is a quick twist of the knob. Maybe our patch isn't loud enough or it's too loud and we kind of want to balance it with other patches, which is a very good idea. So this is going to be the knob to do that. And finally, we have a boost menu right here. Now, this is going to either boost or attenuate in predetermined increments. So this can be useful if you want to adjust the output of your patch with a very simple click of a button. And the values are going to be split up into 3 dB increments, positive and negative, which is a very handy tool. So let's say, for example, you have a patch and you just want to bring it up or bring it down by 6 dB, then this is a quick way to do just that. So this N here stands for normalizing, and normalizing in audio is the process of finding the loudest peak in a signal, boosting that to 0 dB, and then bringing up the rest of the signal by the same amount. So if that's something you want to do to maybe even out your patches a little bit, that's going to be the button there for you. All right, guys, that wraps up this quick tour of the tabs and the top bar. In the next few videos, we're going to dive into the oscillators and all the features that they have. So thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something, and we'll see you in the next one.